Hello! The Campsie Fells are a range of hills in central Scotland, with the highest point only clocking in at 1,896 feet. It fails to constitute as a Munro. Yet despite this, they occupy the skyline for hundreds of thousands of people in Glasgow and the surrounding area, and they even venture into Stirlingshire. Formed of volcanic rock by a volcanic intrusion many eons ago, the Campsies came to being through the geological fault known as the Campsie Fault. The erosion of this fault over the years has uncovered some 30 lava flows, which date all the way back to the Carboniferous period. It's hard to contextualise just how far back in the Earth's history this is, so let me help you. The rock that makes up the Campsies predates the dinosaurs by anywhere between 120 million years and 60 million years. The latter is near enough the same time span between a T-Rex and you and me. Born from explosions of lava hundreds of millions of years ago, this was a world vastly different from ours. This was a time where the climate was tropical, and it's hard to imagine the Campsies in such a setting. Picturing them covered in prehistoric tropical trees is difficult, but then again, it's difficult to picture them covered in any type of tree, which is exactly what this video is going to be about. Borrowing their name from one of the individual hills in the range, the Campsie Fells have a uniquely Scottish name. The word Campsie comes from Scottish Gaelic, and it translates into the crooked fairy hill. Not much is written about the fairies living in the Campsie Fells, but a minister in Aberfoyle, Stirlingshire by the name of Robert Kirk did write this about fairies in general back in 1691. These sifts, or fairies they call Slich Mai or the good people, are said to be of middle nature between man and angel, as were daemons thought to be of old, of intelligent fluid spirits and light-changeable bodies like those called astral, somewhat of the nature of a condensed cloud and best seen in twilight. These bodies be so pliable through the subtlety of spirits that agitate them, that they can make them appear or disappear at pleasure. Nicknamed the Good People, fairies clearly had a special place in many of the local people's hearts. It might just explain why we have entire hill ranges named in their honour. Such is our commitment to folklore in Scotland, why shouldn't we name hill ranges after the fae? I mean, at the end of the day, our national animal is the unicorn. These ancient hills, both in geological terms and in mythical terms, have been around for a while, and they haven't always looked the way they do now. Indeed, it has been theorised that the second highest point of the Campsies, Bin, might just well have been a major central volcano. Standing at 1,870 feet, Bin, just like the highest point of the Campsies, Errol Seat, is classified as a marlin. Too short to be a Munro, it does bear thinking about what height it might have reached just before it started to spew out lava many millions of years ago. The fact that the Campsies are made up of rock dating all the way back to the Carboniferous period did raise the eyebrows of executives at the Grangemouth oil refinery. So much so that the company that operates this refinery, Ineos, purchased a fracking licence which covers this area. Thankfully, they were sent on their way by a highly organised network of local anti-fracking campaigners, who successfully campaigned to make fracking illegal in Scotland. More on that in another video. Now Bin is home to the wreckage of an ill-fated Royal Navy fighter plane, which crashed there in January 1950, killing the 2 men on board. The specific type of plane that crashed was called the Fairy Firefly. Is it purely a coincidence that a plane named after fairies crashed in a hill range named after fairies? That, I will leave to you to decide. Whether it's volcanoes, fairies or plane crashes, the Campsie Fells have had a colourful history, and as fascinating as all of that is, it's not their history that is the focus of this video today. It is their present and their future that has me interested the most. The Campsie Fells today stand as a mere shadow of their former mythical self. The intense period of glaciation that, quite literally, gripped Scotland did not spare the Campsies, but it also helped uncover some of its secrets. Thanks to this erosion, we can today wander up the Campsies and find remnants from hundreds of millions of years ago. Remnants such as fossilised prehistoric trees can be found there if you know where to look. These prehistoric trees are long gone, but others soon took their place. Following this period of glaciation, Scotland found herself covered in the vast Caledonian forest and other various woodland. Life thrived here. We had bears, wolves, ancient bison, and a wide array of wild animals. And whilst a changing climate was partially responsible for the retreat of the forests, the biggest change was still to come. Soon, humans arrived in Scotland. After millennia of deforestation and centuries of sheep farming, the Caledonian forest and the remaining woodland has become something of a rarity. In fact, so profound has the impact of deforestation and overgrazing been that Scotland has become essentially an ecological desert. Out with national parks, it's rare that you see a forested mountainside or hillside, unless for commercial timber purposes. This issue here is not only aesthetic in nature, and has presented a whole range of side effects for humans and animals alike to deal with. From rapid biodiversity loss to landslides, our wilderness is literally falling apart before our very eyes, and the Campsies are no different. Apart from a couple of enclaves of trees deep in the glens where grazing animals cannot reach, and the aforementioned plantations, they lie as desolate as the Wild West. Whilst the views up the Campsie Fells remain visually brilliant, it's hard not to contemplate issues as serious as biodiversity loss when stood atop one of our many crags. What once must have been a key component of central Scotland's wildlife corridor now stands devoid of nature. Loads of species used to call this land home, and they've been forcibly evicted as if we're nature's repo men. Can't pay, we'll cut it all down, harvest any resource possible, and leave the land desolate. Magnificent animals like wolves and lynx and a wide array of other species have been driven to extinction here, and the effects of this are apparent. With the loss of our natural predators from the food chain, the entire ecosystem has been thrown out of whack. They do call it a food chain for a reason. With a piece missing, it breaks apart. Due to the lack of natural predators, deer populations have exploded, and forests and woodland in Scotland and the Campsies have little hope of regenerating. The Campsies, and Scotland in general, are also awash with what has been nicknamed as the White Plague, sheep. These gracious grazing creatures, whilst cute in appearance, have caused some amount of damage to this country's ecology, and it's through no fault of their own, as they are simply bred to be in existence for human gain. Their presence represents a centuries-old industry that has decimated our wilderness for economic gain. Hills and mountains alike, once bastions of the wild, have been reduced to mere grass. The proliferation of such land practices will only serve to keep them as grass, and compound the ecological damage. Look no further than the Campsies as an example of this. In 1892, the Campsies made history as the first person to ski in Scotland did so down her slopes. Sadly, 130 years later, it's only loose rock that skates down the slopes of the Campsies now, and this is due to a lack of vegetative protection. Road signs warning drivers of falling rock can be seen as you venture up there, and I'm sure it leaves you with the same question as me. Must it be this way? Put simply, no, it doesn't have to be this way. The Campsie Fells might be in some state, but there are a multitude of tools at our disposal to ensure that her future is much brighter than our present. We don't have to reinvent the wheel here, nor do we have to offer $100 million for carbon capturing technology. Mother Nature has already provided the answer to the Campsies' ills, and this is where the concept of rewilding comes into play. For those of you unaware of the idea behind it, rewilding is a form of ecological restoration, one where humans take a back seat in the process and give the land as little man management as possible. It is the belief that the land knows how to restore herself better than we ever will. We know that rewilding is possible here in Scotland, as we've already seen successful rewilding projects. Organisations like Trees for Life Scotland have taken on the task of restoring the Caledonian forest to our former glory, and they're doing an outstanding job in actualising their vision. Their work in rewilding the Scottish Highlands over the past decades has been instrumental in the development of rewilding practices in Scotland. As one of the founding members of the Alliance for Scotland's Rainforest, they have shown us that through collaboration and perseverance, our native forests can be restored. We have also seen the community-led buyout of Langholm come to fruition, which became the largest community buyout this country has ever seen. This successful campaign highlights perfectly how communities in Scotland can lead the defence of our natural environment. By pairing rewilding and defending the local environment with opportunities for the community, the Langholm initiative is leading the way in proving that the future doesn't have to be as bleak as it currently looks. There can be a tree-packed future for Scotland, and there can be a tree-packed future for the Campsie Fells. And with enough hard work on our end, there will be. As the climate crisis comes to a crescendo, it is vital that we act with radical, decisive and bold ambition, and it is vital that we do that sooner rather than later. It's with this in mind that I'd like to introduce you to the Campsie Rewilding Initiative. This is an ambitious plan to create a community-led rewilding project and nature reserve within the Campsie Fells. The aim is simple: rewild as much of the Campsies as possible. Not only would this be a visually stunning feat, but the animal and human benefits could be extraordinary. From firming up the soil and stopping loose rock from posing a threat, to creating vital habitat for persecuted birds of prey, this would be a monumental step in the local community's efforts to restore and preserve our natural environment. Whether it's peat bogs, woodland or any other ecosystem, they all deserve a chance to flourish up the Campsie Fells. A trust is currently in the early days of being established so that we can begin the process of restoring our local area. There is absolutely no reason why the community cannot take ownership of this area and, like the Langholm initiative, thrive by working in tandem with the local environment. This is a unique chance to create opportunities for the community through the restoration of our natural habitats. Collaboration will be vital for this initiative, as there are already so many existing projects in Scotland whose successes and failures can be learned from. The rewilding community in Scotland share a common aim, and their support and expertise will be invaluable. This is, of course, a project that will span decades, one that will not be easy in the slightest. It will face many hurdles, yet it is entirely necessary. If you'd like more information on this initiative, then I'll link the various social media accounts in the description below. As we hurtle towards irreversible climate change, it's easy to feel powerless. Whether it's watching Indigenous people in Fairy Creek having to defend old growth temperate rainforest, or reading that hundreds of environmental activists are being killed each year, it's natural to feel helpless in the face of such destruction. Our brains weren't built to comprehend something as gut-wrenching as the Amazon becoming an emitter of carbon, so you will be forgiven for being overwhelmed. But with all of that said, we must not let the enormity of the task ahead paralyse us into inaction and apathy. Aside from expressing unwavering solidarity with Indigenous people and environmentalists around the world and sending whatever money we can afford, we have to ask ourselves the question, what more can we do in the struggle against climate change? It's a question I've pondered more times than I'd like to mention, and every time I do so I come up with the same answer. Think globally, act locally. The best way to take back power and actually see tangible changes is within our local communities. Whilst think globally, act locally is a phrase often attributed to Scottish biologist Patrick Geddes, it's a line of thinking and acting that has been present in Indigenous ways of living for tens of thousands of years. People from our country have taken a lot from Indigenous people over the centuries: land, children, culture, to name but a few. But the most important things they had to offer us, we turned a blind eye to. The original custodians of the land recognised, and still do recognise, the extreme importance of living as a part of nature, not apart from nature. We in this country have excluded ourselves from nature to the point where we barely understand this mouldy rock that we call home. This is partially through no fault of our own. I say no fault of our own because we live in a system that is built intentionally to separate us not only from nature, but from one another. From the get-go, we are bombarded with hyper-individualist ideology, one that has forced us to sacrifice the good of the whole, one that claims that society doesn't even exist. This neoliberal system has given us inequality so eye-wateringly vast that the French Revolution would have already happened by now. This system of domination has been so disgustingly effective that food banks have become a part of our daily life here, and now they barely get a mention. And this is all despite the fact that last year they gave out a record 2.5 million emergency food parcels. Ultimately, it has decimated our communities in the name of private profit, leaving us estranged and alone. Through this exclusion, we seem to have forgotten that everything on this planet is connected in one. Everything is so interconnected that it's difficult to even comprehend. Now, I say it's partially not our fault because we are able to change all of this. We can dismantle systems of domination, and it will be a hard task, but it is possible. Not only is it possible, but it's highly important that we do so. To fight the machine, we must throw sand in its gears. Local projects and actions the world over will help us cause the disruption necessary to the status quo. Wherever there are people standing up and fighting against the climate crisis, they deserve our unwavering solidarity and any money that we can afford for resources. But if we really want to be serious about standing in solidarity, then we have to make sure that we're doing our bit in our own corner of the globe. And this is where thinking globally and acting locally fully comes into play. It's time to be honest with ourselves and admit that our system has decimated the environment to the detriment of billions around the earth. And whilst we want to spring into action and take control of a spiralling crisis, we have to ask, do we really know what we're doing? The truth is, no one understands how to run an ecosystem better than Mother Nature herself. We have attempted to control them, we have tampered with them, and ultimately we have destroyed them. And all of that has left us on the precipice of, or arguably in, a mass extinction. By thinking globally and acting locally, we are committing ourselves to fight against climate change by being bold and ambitious at home. By taking on projects like Rewilding the Campsies, we become a living definition of thinking globally and acting locally. If we are able to remove the factors that are causing the demise of forests and other natural ecosystems that are the lifeblood of this planet, then we can say that we are beginning to do our bit to combat global climate change. Let's build upon the good work of multiple people and organisations in Scotland and across the world. Let's remove the barriers stopping the local environment from regenerating. Let's look after the world we all live in. Losing all this beauty would be a sin. It's time to breathe a new life into this gorgeous globe of ours, and the best way to do that is to let her do it herself. As the Lakota shaman Wallace Black Elk so eloquently put it, we don't have to heal the earth, she can heal herself. All we have to do is stop making her sick. If you've made it this far in my video, then thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And I would appreciate it that wee bit much more if you just shared this video with anyone that you think might be interested. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you after.